If you're a clinician, you face this question pretty much every day, right? When you're picking an all-ceramic restoration, what do? Do you go for the one that's built like a tank and can handle anything? Or do you pick the one that looks so good it's completely indistinguishable from a natural tooth? For the longest time, it really felt like you just couldn't have both. It was always a tough choice, a real trade-off.
And this picture, this says it all. This is where it all began. First generation zirconia was, no joke, a total game changer for durability. I mean, you could build bridges with this stuff that were just unbelievably strong. But just look at it. It's so opaque, almost chalky, right? It had all the muscle you could ever want, but it just didn't have that natural aesthetic look.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the initial zirconia dilemma, then look at how the demand for aesthetics changed things. After that, we'll dive into the microstructure, the really cool science part. We'll compare strength versus beauty, and finally, we'll talk about how to choose the right material for the right job.
First up, the zirconia dilemma. Let's jump back to the beginning. When 3Y zirconia first hit the scene, it was a revolution. The mechanical properties were just off the charts. It immediately became the go-to material for anything that needed to be incredibly durable. But here was the problem, and it was a big one. Because it was so opaque, you couldn't just make a whole crown out of it. It would look like a piece of chalk. So the solution was to use it as a super strong framework, like the chassis of a car, and then layer pretty tooth-colored porcelain over the top. The issue? That porcelain veneer was the weak link. It was prone to chipping, to delaminating, basically just breaking off that super strong core. And that led to some really frustrating clinical failures. So all these headaches created this huge demand from dentists. They were saying, hey, we need something that's both strong and beautiful, something we can use as a single solid piece. In other words, they needed a monolithic material. And then in 2015, we got an answer. A whole new class of zirconia came out. We'll call this one 5Y, and its entire reason for being was to fix that aesthetic problem. It was engineered from the ground up to be highly translucent, perfect for those monolithic crowns everyone was asking for.
So this timeline really lays it out nicely. You start with the first generation, 3Y TCP, awesome strength but not so great on the aesthetics. Then, bam, 2015 hits, and we get the third generation, 5Y PSC. Beautiful aesthetics, but, and this is a big but, lower strength. This really sets up that core trade-off we're talking about, and it kind of hints at what everyone's working on for the future, trying to finally eliminate that choice altogether.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. How in the world did they make this massive leap in aesthetics? Well, the secret isn't on the surface. It's way down at the microscopic level, deep inside the material's crystal structure. On one side, you have our original workhorse, 3Y TZP, and on the other, the new kid on the block, 5Y PSZ.
That original 3Y zirconia, it's got about 5.2% by weight of this special stabilizing ingredient called yttria. Think of that number, 3 mole percent, as the key part of the recipe that gives it that legendary strength. To get that translucency in the newer 5Y zirconia, the scientists basically almost doubled the amount of yttria, taking it up to 5 mole percent. And you can see the result of that recipe change right here under the microscope. Look at the 3Y zirconia on the left. That lower yttria amount gives you these fine, tightly packed grains called tetragonal crystals. Now, look over at the 5Y on the right. With more yttria, you get these much larger cubic crystals. This right here, this is the fundamental difference that changes the entire game. Let's put some numbers to that. In the newer 5Y zirconia, about 70% of its structure is made up of that new cubic phase. So, why does that matter for how it looks? Well, it's because that cubic crystal structure is optically isotropic, which is a fancy way of saying light can pass right through it without getting scattered all over the place. Less scattered light means more light gets through, and that's what makes the material look so much more translucent and natural.
Okay, so now we know how 5Y zirconia gets its good looks. It's all about changing the crystal structure. But that same exact change comes at a really steep price, especially in the one area where the original zirconia was the undisputed champion, its strength. The original 3Y zirconia comes in at a whopping 990 megapascals of flexural strength. The new highly aesthetic 5Y, just 467. That's That's less than half. It's a massive drop in strength. So the million-dollar question is, why? Why does making it look better make it so much weaker?
The answer is this incredible, almost magical mechanism called transformation toughening. Seriously, think of it like a superpower. In that super strong 3Y zirconia, the moment a tiny crack starts to form, the tetragonal crystals right at the tip of that crack instantly transform. They change their shape, and this change does two things. It absorbs the crack's energy, and it expands, creating this compressive zone that literally squeezes the crack shut. It stops a fracture dead in its tracks.
And that is the trade-off. Those stable cubic crystals that make 5Y zirconia so pretty, well, they're stable. They're lazy. They don't do that amazing protective transformation when they're under stress. So without that built-in crack-stopping superpower, the material is just naturally weaker and way more prone to fracture. You get the beauty, but you give up the armor.
Okay, so understanding this fundamental difference in their physical properties is absolutely crucial, because it's what lets us take all this science and apply it in the real world, in the clinic. It's how you make the smart call on which material to use and when. So when do you call on the powerhouse, the 3Y zirconia? Easy. Think posterior crowns and bridges, where the chewing forces are just massive. It's the undisputed champ back there. For long-span bridges that have to handle a lot of stress, or for things like implant abutments that are under constant load, you absolutely want that transformation toughening on your side. In these cases, strength is king.
And what about our aesthetic star, the 5Y? Well, it shines right up front in the smile zone. For things like single anterior crowns, maybe a short span anterior bridge, or for minimally invasive veneers, situations where the biting forces are way lower and looks are everything, 5Y is a fantastic choice. This is where you can confidently trade some of that raw power for that beautiful, natural-looking translucency. So that brings us right back to where we started. Strength or aesthetics? Do we really have to choose? Well, for right now, yeah, we kind of do. But this story is far from over. The next big thing everyone's working on is creating these amazing graded materials. Imagine a single restoration that has a super tough 3Y-like core on the inside, which seamlessly transitions to a beautiful 5Y-like surface on the outside. The Holy Grail, a material with all the strength and all the beauty, it might be just around the corner.